Hello everybody, and in this video I'm going to be talking about volume number 1 of the Korean novel Solo Leveling. This one written by Chugong, and honestly it does not have any interior illustrations. It only has the illustration from what I believe was the original paperback release. Now, this one is being released in English in a 8-book format. Now, initially, this series was released over 13 volumes, but I think about a year ago, the Korean publisher published it as an 8-volume double box set. They were all with these kind of covers, and since these are the covers that we're getting in English, my guess is we're getting the 8-book set. Now, Solo Leveling takes place on an Earth where portals have begun to open worldwide, and these portals lead to dungeons. Yes, our classic RPG type dungeons filled with monsters and eventually a boss room. Now, the catch is that if the boss is not defeated within a certain number of days, these portals basically allow the monsters of the dungeon to escape into our world, causing, well, lots of death and havoc. Now, at the same time these portals appeared, quite lucky for us, a number of human beings started having an awakening, certain powers and strength and abilities, and these people were known as hunters. In order to judge the rank of hunters, how strong they were, and to sort of correlate those to the difficulty of a dungeon, they create this ranking system A through E. Now, when this book opens up, our main character is Jinwoo, who is a E rank. In fact, not just any E rank, but perhaps the lowest E rank. He is just a shred above an average human being. Well, he shows up for a job. He's been told it's a pretty low-level dungeon. In fact, all the other hunters are really happy to see Jinwoo because they're like, if he's here, that means that the association has deemed that this dungeon will be a cakewalk. Well, they all head into the dungeon and, well, I'm sure you can figure out that it ain't no cakewalk. In fact, it comes to one point where Jinwoo faces certain death, and all of a sudden he hears this disembodied voice say, "Congratulations, you are now a player." And all of a sudden, Jinwoo finds out that, unlike every other hunter in the world, he can level up. He can become stronger. Where will these new abilities take Jinwoo? What will happen as he comes into conflict or becomes better known by other hunters? Well, that's what this series is all about. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with Korean novels, particularly the Korean equivalent, let's say, of light novels. So I don't really know how much of this is the author, how much of this is Korean, sort of popular novels, web novels. In general, I'm just going to tell you what I thought about this book, and here's the thing. It's a little closer, I would say, to a lit RPG than the typical light novel. A lot of light novel tropes, the teenage main character, the main character who becomes ridiculously OP and gets all the harem of girls and all sorts of ecchi and all that kind of stuff and fan service, and you know, the main character probably doesn't really have all that much of a goal other than to become famous and get lots of babes and all that kind of stuff. Well, Solo Leveling does none of that. Solo Leveling has a character that is really pragmatic as opposed to being just vanilla. In a lot of light novels, obviously, we have a main character who is a good guy just for the sake of being a good guy, unless, you know, he's Honjaman from Mari Fureta. But anyway, that doesn't matter. Jinwoo is not like that. He is a good guy, but when push comes to shove, he'll make the tough choices. When he needs to, he'll get his hands dirty. Because the thing about Jinwoo is that he's older, and he's not doing this because he wants to be famous or because he wants to be wealthy. He's doing it to survive. He's doing it because his mom is incredibly sick, his dad's out of the picture, and in order to pay for his mother's health bills and also be the man of the house and try to make sure that his younger sister is taken care of and fed and getting a proper education, and so that, you know, he's so proud of her because she's doing so well in school. He wants to make sure she can go to the best university possible. And so these are all the things that are really motivating Jinwoo to go in and fight these dungeons. And as the book progresses, it is also the thing that is pushing him and driving him to become stronger and to try and get more money as he goes. It's kind of cool to have an adult character who is motivated by very adult reasons. There's also almost zero romance in this book. In fact, it was really funny to at one point see how Jinwoo is so focused on his personal goals, his goals of taking care of his family, that there's at least one female that tries to get in his good books and he's like, that's more trouble than it's worth, and just blows her off completely. The other supposed love romance, well, I don't know how that's going to pan out, but let's just say if you're looking for romance and all sorts of warm, fuzzy feelings, well, this book ain't that book. In fact, quite the opposite. There's a ton of violence in this book. I mean, this does not try and make things nice at all. There are amputations, decapitations, disembowelments. There is murder, there is monsters, if you're really squeamish on the whole violence and blood thing, this might not be the title to check out. And what I found kind of funny is that online I saw a bunch of reviews, people on Goodreads and stuff like that, talking about how they had a hard time getting into this book. When I sat down and started this book, I plowed through the first 70 plus pages like it was nothing. I did not find that pacing was an issue with this at all. Now, part of that may be because I am a light novel reader, and because the second that I knew what was going on in this, even the first one or two pages, I was like, man, it is about to get real and messy in this book, and I really want to know why. So it really, for me, I guess possibly because I'm a fan of like those dungeon dive type novels, I was right on board for this and was in it all the way through. The other thing that was kind of interesting about this, and that really sort of piqued my interest a bit, was Jinwoo himself realizing that this whole level up system, it's not some benevolent gift from God or something. It itself seems to have an end goal in mind. In fact, Jinwoo at one point is even like, well, it wants me to be the strongest I can be because it has some kind of design. I need to be the strongest I can be so I can make money. So hey, our endpoints kind of align, so I'm just going to roll with it, even though I do get the feeling that there's a lot more going on here than just simply I got lucky. And the book also does some really good jobs in terms of the world building. I mean, obviously this first book is much more about Jinwoo. It's about him and how he gets to this point where he's able to level up. It's about how he is, what he starts doing to get stronger, what kind of situations that lands him in, especially since a lot of people he's kind of trying to play on the down low that he's like getting stronger, because again, no other hunter ever has. And so it's kind of interesting to see how he's treated by people based on their assumption that he's weak, and how he reacts to them because he knows he's so not weak. But with a lot of that focus on his development, I still felt like there was some good world building going on here. This book does address the idea of how government agencies would become involved with these hunters, how laws themselves might even be somewhat lenient, or the law would kind of overlook things just in order to make sure that strong hunters continued to be able to take on dungeons. In fact, to the point where there's just this saying of what happens in a dungeon stays in a dungeon, which we see just about every kind of effect of that saying when we're reading even just this first book. It even gets into the idea of what happens when you have corporations getting involved in this whole thing. And of course, there's a monetary value to the items and stuff that they're able to get from the dungeons as they're pulling these items out of dungeons. Even our own technology and what we use these items for starts adapting in our world. And so there is a huge monetary component to this whole thing. And so, of course, you have private funded guilds starting up, and you have them poaching strong hunters from one another, and how, you know, the low-level hunters stick with the government because, well, that's the only ones who will have them, and how that's still sort of seen as a grunt thing, and that you're not really top dog until you get into a private guild. As I said, like, there was just this really sort of realistic idea of how this hierarchy would start and how governments and corporations would begin to work either together or even compete with one another in order to have the best talent and to make sure that these dungeons get conquered in a timely manner. Overall, Solo Leveling was a really solid book. As I said, it had a main character that I liked. I liked the fact that he wasn't just plain old vanilla, and that he was willing to do what needed to be done in order to make sure that at the end of the day he went home safe to take money to take care of his mom and his sister. I liked that a lot of the sort of tropey stuff that we have often thrown in, it feels like, in a lot of light novels, was completely absent. The author seems to feel no need to include or check off those boxes. They're just telling the story that they want to tell. And I also really appreciated that by the end of this book, there are about 3 or 4 different storylines all going on, all sort of swirling in this conflict or potential conflict around Jinwoo. There's a lot going on by the end of this book that you can kind of sort of see where this story can go several different ways, and there's going to be a number of obstacles in Jinwoo's way immediately, and probably a ton more down the road. Overall, Solo Leveling's not going to be for everybody, and I'm not even going to say that it's one of those must-buy titles, unless, of course, that you're really into lit RPGs or you're into dungeon diving type light novels. This is definitely a strong contender to pick up if you like that type of genre. In this video, I'd like to say a special thanks to Karu, RP Geist, Mitchell Von Regen, Mirage, and Ariuf for their support on Patreon, as well as the support of all of my patrons who helped keep this channel running, helped me to build and create some better ideas, as well as supporting other projects like EnglishLightNovels.com and the Light Novel Podcast. So for my next read, we're going to stick with the whole theme of leveling up and fighting dungeons and monsters and stuff, but this time the stakes are a little bit lower. It's just going to be an MMORPG, sort of a VR type thing, and that's going to be volume number 1 of Beaufory. I don't want to get hurt, so I'll max out my defense. That's going to be my next review. In the meantime, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, all that kind of jazz. I appreciate you taking a look at this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.